All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're tackling a really wild idea from our source material. What if I told you the secret to getting truly wealthy is to stop using your own money? I know, it sounds nuts, but let's see how this argument actually plays out.
And boom, right off the bat, the source hits us with this. It sounds completely backward, doesn't it? We're all taught that saving our own cash and being responsible with it is the smart thing to do. But the argument here is that it actually takes way more brain power, more creativity, to go out and raise capital than it does to just spend what's already sitting in your bank account.
So if you're not using your own money, what are you using? Well, it all comes down to this strategy called OPM, which, you guessed it, stands for other people's money. The core idea is actually pretty simple. You use capital from other sources, think banks, private investors, to buy assets that generate an income for you. That's the whole game.
Okay, let's get into our first section here, the lazy investor's secret. So what's so secret about it? Well, the source material argues that this whole path of slowly, painstakingly saving up your own money to invest is based on a mindset that actually traps you and keeps you from building any real wealth.
Yeah, they call this the poor dad mindset. And you probably know exactly what this sounds like, right? It's that voice that tells you to avoid debt like the plague and squirrel away every single penny. It's the conventional wisdom most of us grew up with. But this whole explainer is about flipping that advice completely on its head.
And that brings us to our next big point, which is, well, it's just as controversial as the first one. The source makes this super bold claim. In today's economic environment, savers are losers.
So why would they say something so harsh? The logic they lay out is actually pretty straightforward. Think about it. When governments are just printing massive amounts of money, what happens to the value of each dollar you've so carefully saved? It goes down. That's inflation, plain and simple. So your hard-earned savings are constantly bleeding purchasing power just by sitting there in a bank account.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because it's all about the psychological shift. On one side, you have the poor mindset, which says, I can't afford it. And when you say that, your brain just shuts down. It's a dead end. But look at the rich mindset. It reframes it as a question. How can I afford it? See the difference? That little switch forces your brain to kick into gear, to start problem solving and looking for creative ways to make it happen.
All right, so let's keep building on this, because it leads to one of the most important ideas in this entire philosophy, the huge difference between good debt and bad debt. According to the source, not all debt is the enemy we've been taught it is.
And this table just lays it out perfectly. Look at bad debt. It's used to buy liabilities, things that lose value, like cars or that new TV you put on a credit card. The key effect? It takes money out of your pocket every month. Now flip over to good debt. This is the complete opposite. Use it to acquire assets, like an apartment building, that actually put money into your pocket. It's really that simple. It's all about what the debt is used for.
And the one metric that tells you if something is an asset or a liability is cash flow. It all comes down to this. If, at the end of the month, after all the expenses are paid, an investment generates positive cash flow, you've got yourself an asset. If it's costing you money every month, that's negative cash flow, and it's a liability. The goal always is positive cash flow.
Okay, so if the goal is to use good debt to buy assets that cash flow, what's the ultimate prize? Well, according to the source, it's something called an infinite return, and there's a great little case study to explain exactly what that looks like.
So check this out. The investor finds a small condo in Maui, but instead of using his own savings for the down payment, he uses a credit card. So right there, the deal is 100% financed with other people's money. Now, after paying the mortgage, the credit card bill, and all the other expenses, the property still put an extra $25 into his pocket each month. It was cash flow positive.
And this, right here, is the absolute key. How much of his own money was left in this deal? A big fat zero. Nothing. Zilch. He now owned an asset, he was collecting cash flow every month, but his personal capital wasn't at risk at all.
So what does that do to his return on investment? Well, if you divide any amount of profit by an investment of zero, the result is mathematically infinite. And that is the ultimate goal of the OPM strategy, to control assets that produce income without having any of your own money tied up in them.
And the source points out other huge advantages. For one, the money you borrow from a bank isn't taxed like your paycheck is. Plus, as the property's value grows, you can do things like a cash-out refinance, basically taking out a new, bigger loan and pocketing the difference, tax-free, to fund your next investment.
This creates a high velocity of money, letting you build your portfolio way faster.
Now, before you get too excited and run off to apply for a loan, the source provides a really, really important piece of caution. This strategy is absolutely not for the uninformed.
This quote gets right to the heart of it. A great deal can turn into a disaster in the hands of an uneducated investor. And on the flip side, a savvy investor can find a gold mine in a deal that looks tricky to everyone else. The risk isn't in the debt or the property itself. The risk is in the person managing it.
So, what do you need? Well, first and foremost, financial education. You have to be able to analyze a deal and understand the numbers inside and out. You need to be professional enough to convince a bank that you're a safe bet. And you need that creative mindset we talked about, always asking how instead of saying can't.
And that brings us to our final slide, and a question to really leave you with. The source material basically frames finance as a game. The safe path of saving and avoiding debt, that's playing not to lose. The OPM strategy, while it for sure requires more knowledge and creativity, is all about playing to win. So, which game are you playing?